okay. It's fine. I can keep recording, Liz, so let's keep going.
Okay. Okay, so here's my site, peterdudek.com.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a shot from an installation I did a number of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And down here I got the archive, so I go way back in time, post Skowhegan there. This is the first piece I did after Skowhegan.
Mm-hmm.
That was a time when I was really kind of influenced by the so-called expanded field artists, the generation that came after the earthworks. That term was coined by Rosalind Krauss. In this piece he wrote partly about Mary Miss's work. So it was like Mary Miss and Alice Aycock, George Trakas, Richard Fleschner, and others who at that time were, it wasn't like they were against working in the gallery, but they could go anywhere with their work. They could make a piece of work at the end of a parking lot, or an empty lot in the East Village, or an abandoned building in the Bronx, or a field in New Jersey. That sort of thing. They didn't have to go to the Southwest. Didn't have to go that remote. They didn't have to use bulldozers and dump trucks necessarily. They could use it very casually with the work materials that were available. For example, Gordon Matta Clark would cut up buildings in the South Bronx and bring back chunks to the gallery, that sort of thing. So for a long time, I would say 10 years, I was doing that kind of work, and my working process was that I would make money, mostly doing a carpentry, and then save up, and then do a big project, and keep that cycle happen for a while. And then I slowly kind of introduced more of a studio practice, but still kind of dealing with architecture,
Mm-hmm.
another bleacher project. Then color started coming into play.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this site had very little art history to it at the time, Kenmore Square in Manhattan. And so I'd often go around finding sites to do stuff on. But then I started just kind of hanging out in studio and producing stuff like that, or like this here.
So hold on. So when you would try to find sites in the city or wherever you were,
Mm-hmm.
did you just do it, or did you have to get permission to use that spell? Like, how did that work?
Right. Well, this first show here, this was part of a big show on Ward's Island in the East River. So that was an organized exhibition. This show here was at a college up in Massachusetts. I was invited to do something temporary there. This piece here, I found the space, and I was interested in the neglected condition. Now it's totally different, remade that space. And I worked with, I think it was City Arts, to get permission, and they also got insurance for the piece, right? And I also worked had work in shows that the Organization of Independent Artists, OIA, curated, and they were very active at the time in the late 70s, early 80s. So there were organizations like the OIA or City Arts, and also Lower Cultural Council. I think I did I did a project with them also.
Mm-hmm.
And do you hear that in the background?
Yeah, it's fine, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a hunter, so they're doing some security test or something.
Okay. That's nice. That's an interesting piece.
This was at the Murray Sharp Walsh program when they were in Tribeca. And so I did a whole series of architectural like forms, plaster slab, metal legs, and fabric. And this kind of came out of it as well.
Right. That's nice. What material is that?
This is sheet metal, and these are blankets that I cut up.
Okay. Okay.
And more blankets, marbles, this time with welded steel tower, cast plaster. a kind of felt maze.
It's beautiful.
And so I was just, trying to play around with different materials and layering and this having more of a kind of archaeological quality of civilization information layered on top of it.
So when you're working with the different materials, Peter, that's very cool too. When you're working with different materials, do you find that the materials and your engagement with them produce an idea around what you want to express, or do you go in thinking, this is my idea and I'm going to find the appropriate materials to express that idea with?
No, the materials definitely lead you, at
Okay.
least early on, because like I did a residency in Poland in the early 90s, and I was drawn to their blankets, and I did a couple of pieces there with sheet metal and blankets. And then when I got back, I started going through, secondhand stores and, finding things that suggested, finding blankets that suggested pieces, So that was the interesting thing. The materials would kind of lead the way. And then, things become, then you have a kind of body of work, so to speak. And then suddenly you stop finding those blankets. And that's the question. Do I just force the issue and keep on looking, or say, well, okay, I did blankets for a little while,
Right.
And it's funny when people find your work during that period, years later, they'll say, you still using blankets? That's
Right.
a weird thing. So, and the answer is yes or no.
So what, tell us about, this is an installation of some kind. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. This is a drawing show. So what I decided to do was to create a fictitious recreation of my studio. So everything's in play at that point because it's a studio, and then certain pieces came out of that idea.
I see. Yeah.
And
are these mostly metal? The structures are made out of
the
metal?
black forms are metal. Yeah, those are welded steel, kind of fence-like things. This is cardboard and plywood and felt and plaster. And like this kind of form, I drew on. I drew that shape on plywood, cut it out, then I stapled cardboard to the sides, then poured plaster in the voids, so it becomes like an extruded drawing. Right? And this is part of that process there.
Right.
And then I think I have to go over here to show the next one. Yeah. And that led to this, where you got this multi-colored panel system. The size of the panels and the fences are based on the Fibonacci series. And this was at the drawing center. So I show them documentation at previous show. And they gave me the floor. And so I decided for the first time I needed to cover the floor for the drawings. And so I came up with this panel system that could be close packed like a carpet, or open up and go around these columns,
Right.
And I put in these seating devices, which kind of references my early interest in this architectural thing that people would enter and sit on and sort of thing. So different thoughts about organization and chaos and that sort of thing.
Was your color choice here influenced by Mondrian painting?
It's kind of mid-century, or even, of course, Corbusier is earlier than that, but his color choices too. So there's still a tie-in to architecture, I would say. Yeah.
That looks like a very interesting piece. Did you have people like interact with it, like when they would come in and sit down? And I mean, was there, how did people deal with this in the space?
Yeah, with this, yeah, they could sit there and of course, in my very early structures, it was always ambiguous because they would come upon an empty arena structure, right? And so there'd be a kind of presence of absence. And so there's a question, do you enter it? And once you do enter it, are you the only one there? Or is there a conversation, a dialogue, a movement between audience members? And that's what I was hoping would happen with the chair, you know.
Right.
And then that led to this piece at Smack Melon, and where I opened up the space between panel systems, right?
Hmm.
And so you could really move through it, and there were still chairs and stuff to sit on, and so yeah, the viewer was in the piece. So you know, it harks back to my very early influences, where the operational space of the viewer was inside the piece, physically inside the piece, right, as opposed to standing back and looking at something, you know.
That's nice. The structure that's on top that's kind of stacked or layered,
Right.
is that all wood? Is that all one piece?
Yeah, it's all wood, and what it is, it's let me go through. I thought I had a close up of something, but what it is it's I took hollow core doors and I drew patterns on them and I cut them up using a jigsaw.
Uh,
And so what happens, you get these little chunks of shapes, and because it's a hollow core door, you have these spaces inside. They're very architectural.
right.
And I did a whole series of them, uh, some wall mounted, you know, just by cutting them out of hollow shapes out of hollow core doors, and just laminating the shapes together and mounting them either vertically or on the wall. I went down to Columbus State University and for about maybe 10 days. And the idea is was to work with students. So I got them involved with making this piece. And so this wire thing, I made a loop out of armature wire and I handed it to a student, and I told him how big to make it, and he welded it for me.
Mhm.
And then some other students were finding materials in thrift stores, and others, you know, printed this thing out here that seemed to respond to some of the imagery I was dealing with. Some cast plaster. This is just stacked
Mhm.
chipboard. So
Right.
it's not glued, and so it was just, you know, that whole kind of soup of uh, putting imagery underneath the panels, as well as, you know, so partly hiding, partly exposing, kind of thing.
So
And- Hmm?
was this Peter, I'm sorry, was this like a workshop or something that you did for them where the students got involved?
Yeah, kind of, you know, and like I gave them all research to do. They
Mm,
researched different architects. I each gave them a different architect to look up. And then while they were doing that, I also engaged them in the making of this piece.
mhm,
And so some of them uh, say cut the panels, you know, and so, you know, I gave them certain responsibilities,
mm,
and some brought in imagery and printed it out, and that sort of thing. Someone went to thrift stores and found objects they could add to
mhm.
the piece. Like, so it was a little dialogue with the students,
Uh-huh.
you know, giving them some research and guidance, and then just getting in the shop and making it, you know.
That's great. I mean, that's a real collaboration with them. That it's a nice way for them to learn, actually, I would think.
Yeah. And so this kind of continues that. Um, this is up at the University of Massachusetts, and I made this wall drawing as well as these individual pieces. And, you know, and these pieces, when you come back to the studio, they often become other pieces. They don't necessarily stay the
Mhm,
same, you know. And again, here's another one of those stack
mm.
things in welded aluminum, cast plaster, etc. this here is a log that a beaver chewed. This is some sort of wire. You see this shadow here is from this cloud that's hanging.
Mhm.
I did a whole series of clouds. So I traced that shadow on a cardboard sheet. I cut
Mhm.
it out and I flipped it around across all around the room. And so that's how that line got
Right.
made, by tracing that shaped cardboard on the wall and then following it up with paint.
What's the material of the three-dimensional cloud?
It's like this stuff here. It's uh, called right here. It's called Sculptamold. It's kind of like a fluffy plaster, and you can shape it by hand. Whereas plaster gets very runny, and you got to pour it into a form usually.
Oh,
That's what these white slabs are, and this one here. But the cloud there and here. Let's see if there's more cloud. Yeah, here and
right.
this one here. Yeah, there's an armature that I apply this fluffy kind of plaster to, and then it's suspended from a single wire.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So they're lightweight, very light.
Fairly lightweight, the small
Right.
ones especially, and sometimes have a styrofoam core to it.
Mhm. I like the different materials, the different the textural elements and the color elements being different and the forms being so different as well. The sort of the geometry of the more architectural forms and these kind of free floating organic forms, and then the drawing on the wall. It's a really interesting dynamic between the sort of man-made feeling and I mean, it's all man-made, but the sort of implication of man-made versus something that's a more natural uh, form or something related more to nature. It's very interesting. Did people, like, when they would go into this, did they feel like they could walk through it comfortably, or was there? I don't know if you had much opportunity to really like see people interact, but
Yeah, mostly at openings, and they certainly move through it freely during the opening. And it's not like I mean, there's plenty of space in between the pieces,
mhm.
so it's not like they felt they would bump into something.
So they felt free to move around it and be like inside of it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's great. That's great. So I saw this on your website before. So what, like, talk about the chair, that hanging chair.
right. That's a chair I found, and it's kind of a generic kind of molded plastic chair, bright orange,
Uh-huh.
and of course, I'm interested in the shakers. That's a shaker peg
Yeah.
thing, and they're known for hanging their chairs. And then there's this form here. I took a cabinet apart that had these metal legs,
Hmm.
and then I took lawn chair webbing, and I made this piece.
Hmm.
And so it looks like something that could have been found, but was actually something found and altered.
Right.
And so that's what a lot of this work is, found, altered, found, made from scratch, that sort of thing. And then I added this photo of Mies van der Rohe buildings in Chicago that I hand tinted.
Hmm.
And uh, so that combination of things. And this is part of a series that's still ongoing. The kind of this this is related to the panel system, and I still got the dialogue between something on the wall and something on the floor is something functional,
Hmm.
no longer functional, is something that seems functional but really isn't.
Right. Right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, that I like the dichotomy of that a lot, and you say that this is an ongoing idea that you're still working with.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So right now, most of your work is all studio based or made in the studio. It's
Right.
not
Yeah.
site specific.
Right. I'm working on a proposal for a large piece. I don't know if it'll ever get built, but primarily concentrating on studio work in the writing, right, on the book projects. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I also do prints and curatorial work. I don't know if we want to get into that or not, but the the prints.
I'd love to see some of the prints. Let's see.
So that started because, and this print is a drawing by Corbusier of a theoretical structure of poured concrete metal posts that a certain part of his work that it's based on, and which frees up the exterior walls from any structural responsibility. So that became a central image that I would use. So, for example, the house dreaming of that modernist structure, whereas in fact, this is a Sears catalog house. The drawing was made at the
Mm.
same time as this, you know. But then I flipped it, you know, I mean,
Uh,
it's like who's dreaming of who, you know, and maybe they're dreaming of themselves, you know.
so what kind of prints are these?
These are inkjet prints.
These are inkjet prints.
So everything's handled digital. I scan it and, you know, layer it together.
Good titles.
This is a big print. This is maybe 50 inches wide, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And
Wow.
this was the foliage here was taken from a Dutch drawing that I popped in this
Mm.
almost a still-like structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, part of the, you know, I've been collecting these images for years, way back early since art school, really, but I've never revealed them till much later. You know, it was only within the last, say, 20 years that I decided to expose the library, so to speak. You know, so like in this drawing, you get, you know, Mies van der Rohe, Frank Lloyd Wright, Walter Gropius, Corbusier, all these people, all these architects, kind of building the scaffolding, so to speak, for this idea here. Yeah. This is from an Andy Warhol piece. I took his can opener.
Mm-hmm. And these prints are generally what size are they?
Uh, the most of them are in two sizes: 24 by 24 being the largest, and then 12 by 12.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, some of them are rectangular as opposed to square, and, and yeah.
Wow. I like that. That's nice. Are you still making prints?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
I just made a print into a sculpture, actually.
Hmm.
And, I don't have an image of that right now. But I'm also doing this series of comparatives, you know.
Yeah.
I put a sculpture up against a piece of architecture. So that's part of that series.
I like a lot of these prints. It's interesting how a sculptor envisions on a two-dimensional surface, you know,
Mhm.
because you are really preoccupied with the structure that you're building on a two-dimensional plane.
Right. And then there's these shows I put together. And
Are these artists that you select that you know collaborate with to put shows together with for them?
yeah, I come up with these concepts like Dead Fit Beauty. I would say this is the first important one I did,
Uh,
where the uh, the artists were creating fictitious life forms.
mm-hmm.
And So it was Michael Reese, Brian Crockett, David Shaw, Allison Schatz, John Von Bergen, Peggy Preheim, and Danny Kaufman. So this was right before they cloned a sheep, right? So this is in the 90s, right before that. I mean, you knew it was coming, and I knew some artists were dealing with ideas of manipulating life forms and genetics. And now there's a whole movement called bioart,
Mhm.
that deals with a lot of that stuff. So here, Michael Reese showed his 3D prints for the first time. And this is a photo by David Shaw.
Oh,
This
wow.
is a photo by Von Bergen, where he took the plastic skeleton and hit it with a heat gun and kind of twisted it and
Mhm.
photographed it. Another one with him. These are the 3D prints by Reese.
Oh, interesting.
They're small but very delicately detailed.
Yeah.
And this is Peggy Preheim. A more hands-on, but still, mutated kind of thing. And this Allison Schatz, she had a mirrored suit that a performer wore walking through this foliage, and she photographed it.
That's beautiful.
So there's really 3 shows I'd probably want to talk about, and that's one, and the other one is architecture. And so in this one, a lot of my images and my work are in. At first, I wasn't going to do that, but I wanted to curate a show that was really, what I do, what my interest is.
Mhm.
And so as I went around, and here's the artist.
Oh, cool.
Every time I invited someone, they said, "Oh, how come you're not in the show?"
Yeah. That happens. That happens.
And he said, you do this, how come you're not in the show? And I
Right.
said, well, what do you mean? It's my idea. It's just an idea. So eventually I put a sculpture, and I think it's in here.
Is- So these are the different artists that we're seeing now.
Yeah, it is Peter Boynton. This is Rita McBride.
Wow. Very cool.
This is Isa Genskin.
Mm.
And Genskin, Jem Bustamante,
Mhm.
and Caitlin Deer over there.
Where's your piece in this?
Yeah, well, it's not in here. It'll be in a new website.
Okay. Okay.
This is my print on the cover there.
Cool.
I got in on the cover. Yeah.
That selection that you showed, it was very interesting in how the different artists' work kind of, related to one another. It was very, very diverse, but also a consistent thread amongst the work. Very interesting.
All 3 shows, Dead for Beauty, Architecture, and Photasm, were at Hunter College. And so that was an example of how the teaching allowed me to expand into curating, and became a different kind of outlet for my interest,
Right.
So that whole idea, yeah, you're making sculpture, but you can also write about it and curate it, etc. This is David Shaw again, where he took a wooden structure and laminated holographic film to it. So when the light was on it, it had a kind of rainbow spectrum.
Hmm.
And Katie Mertz, this was a floor piece, but she also had this rope suspended, and there was some fruit on it.
Hmm.
Heidi Schlatter, these freestanding panels of photographic interiors of suburban houses. Jennifer Belande. So the whole concept of photasm was sculptors dealing with photography. And sometimes it became a sculpture, Sometimes it was a photo. It's just a photo, but it was a photo of a sculpture, This whole thing's man-made. That was Von Bergen again. And this is David Shaw again. And these are just wooden blocks. He laminated holographic film, and then he created glass splashes that he placed on the blocks.
Oh, cool.
So it looks like a digital image, perhaps, but it's all analog. It's all
Right,
hands.
right. That's very interesting. Wow. Um, so, when you talk about teaching allowing you to do these other endeavors, don't you think that in teaching you're doing it anyhow? The thinking about when you're thinking in that sort of teacher's mode, I mean, there is a certain level of curation that goes on when you're looking at different people's work, right? And how you talk about different people's work. There is also that while there may not be like on the spot or pre or post writing about your teaching methodologies, the fact that one is thinking about ideas to discuss with students is a form of narrative within one's mind that can be translated to writing, I suppose, but I think it's sort of a natural thing that happens when we're teaching. Don't you think so?
That allows you to incorporate ideas that you're actively developing, exploring in your own work, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, because you're doing it for students anyway. Like that kind of thinking about ideas, about how to develop an idea. One does it for the students to help them learn. I mean, applied to what they're doing, certainly. But that thinking process also allows the teacher, and the artist to also do that anyway within their own work. I mean, I feel like it's all related, the thinking process.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. And and uh, and the students see that, the whole notion of teachers as artists, artists as teachers, and that you're engaged yeah, Hunter is a research school, right?
Mhm.
So your art making is your research
Right,
component, right?
exactly.
And
Exactly.
and and it's rewarding for them to see you pull that in to the classroom, right?
Absolutely.
And it's rewarding for me to take some of those students and give them their first couple shows after art school.
Mm.
So in those 3 shows, I think there were 4 former students,
Oh,
right?
oh, that's nice. That's very
Right.
nice.
Yeah, because some uh, of those, for example, the Dead Fit Beauty show, at that point, I was teaching advanced sculpture, and I was in the shop around that crew more,
Mhm.
and I was seeing them doing these gangly kind of creature-like things, not really science fiction, maybe a touch of that, but also just, doing their own kind of mutations of life forms. And so they gave me the idea to do that show, you know.
Mhm.
So I put, let's see, two former students into that show with other uh, artists with artists who were already out there and had established some degree, and the former students totally held their own, and
Great.
that was what was rewarding to see. The same thing happened in the architecture show. Different students were in that show,
Mm.
and then also the photasm show. So I mean, if that didn't happen, I think I'd be missing something. It's important to uh, I think not only have them make stuff in a school context, but to help them, give them an opportunity to do it on a different stage afterwards.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, it's part of the collaborative thinking that goes on between, and it happens with all creative people, I think. It could be between a teacher and a student. It could be between, different artists who come together as a group and, collaborate on an idea, how things feed off of one another. I do think that, as artists, I do, and visual artists in particular, when you look at how other artists, writers and musicians, particularly musicians, filmmakers, where they really do need the interaction. with one another to create whatever it is. I think that we as visual artists do better. You know, we have a more expanded experience when we allow ourselves that collaborative experience in whatever form it takes. I really think that that's important.
Yeah, I don't know how we're doing on time, but
Well, we're longer than the 30 minutes, but that's okay. That's all right. Did you want to talk about something else?
well, I just wanted to perhaps talk about this piece
Sure.
because this was these are different studio views. You know, I had different studios over the years.
Right.
Some of them temporary, some longer. I had a studio in Williamsburg for like over 20 years, and this was a studio I had for a few years up in Massachusetts because sculptors, we develop storage issues, right?
Yeah.
I'm the largest collector of Peter Dudek sculpture. What do I do with it? How much can I actually save? That kind of stuff. So I decided to get this space up in Western Massachusetts. I knew this space had been abandoned for a while. It was in raw shape. And the landlord had demolished the second floor and didn't realize he did not have a this is those stacks I was
Yes.
talking about, hollow
Yes.
core doors.
Mhm.
And decided he didn't have somebody to rent the space, so he stopped work on it. So I discovered it and made him offer, and the idea was to at first just create visual storage. I would be able to just lay everything out. I cleaned up the space, painted the floor,
Mhm.
made it less raw. It had wraparound windows, had incredible light. It did not, he ripped out all the electrical fixtures, so there was no electrical light, and there was no radiators, there was no heat. But it was on the second floor, so it was sandwiched between two floors that had heat, so it never got terribly cold. A fantastic light, and I found one outlet that was live, so I could charge all my cordless tools.
Uh,
So I decided to treat it as a daylight studio. I would work according to light time, daylight.
mhm.
And the idea being also that I would thin out the collection, but because of that one electrical outlet, the opposite happened. I started making work. So instead of thinning out the collection, I made more work, and you can kind of see my library. I started, eventually it was much more. I moved my library in there, just started hanging out. The landlord thought I was squatting there. I had so much stuff there.
Mhm.
Uh, and it was right next to a police station and city hall, so I could use their toilets if I wanted. And it was a good time. I had it for a few years. And then I got a different space and had to thin out the work.
So do you still have a space in Massachusetts
Yeah,
somewhere?
yeah, I still have a space. Yeah,
It's a different location.
yeah.
And where's your studio in New York?
In New York, I tend to like all the prints. I get printed out at SVA,
Mhm.
and I use a lot of their studios for stuff. I,
Okay,
or I pay people to weld stuff and that sort of thing.
I see.
I like the idea of paying people.
Hey, listen, that I think that's good, I mean, that it gives them work, helps everybody.
Yeah, I like contributing to the economy. Yeah,
Yeah.
but so I do different things in different spaces, but so like the last show I was in, which is that project space in Dumbo, uh, I had the metal parts welded in Massachusetts. I had photos printed on metal at Dugal here in Brooklyn, and then I had some of the plaster pieces made myself in my Massachusetts studio. Yeah.
Mhm. That takes a lot of that's complicated, it takes a lot of coordination, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes it looks like I'm organized.
But this is what I'm thinking, like, so if you have like these, you have different people maybe making you stuff, then you make some of the stuff, then you're like in New York, then you're making some of the stuff in Massachusetts. I mean, in all of this, in your own, because you said earlier that a lot of your final, whatever it's going to come to as a final result, happens along the way is in terms of how you interact with the materials. So like when you're pulling the different making of the different materials from different places, does it make it harder for you to come up with the sort of the final product, the final experience?
It's all a matter of time. You just got to block out the time, you know. And uh, the other thing that's important to me is face to face. You know,
Mhm.
you know the whole. You know, I'm working on 2 books, right, and a website, and you know these people doing the work for me. You know, we create Google Docs, and you know it's okay. Okay, I'm going to send you some files in Google Doc, but when you get it, I got to meet you in person. You
Mhm.
know, yeah, I can't. You know, uh, the face to face is absolutely crucial for every component. So it's just a matter of having the time, scheduling the time to make that happen.
Right, right. That makes sense. I agree. You know, now you're saying that, and here we're sitting here having this talk virtually, and we're not, but we did meet face to face
Yeah,
prior to
yeah,
prior
that's
to
good.
this.
I think the first one, yeah, it was important to have a face to face one.
I totally agree, and fortunately we made it work. You know,
Yeah,
so and by the way, after we get done with this project right here, this recording, you know, whenever you have time, and I'll work around my schedule, we should get together and have another cup of coffee and chat about things.
yeah.
Because
No, the whole, yeah, we were at a restaurant last time. Food is very important. Uh, to the art making process. In fact, I've that's in my syllabus.
Mhm.
I try to eat as much as possible with my students. I explain that you can't look or make work if you're hungry. You can't look at it or make it, and so I'll often eat lunch together. So there's no downtime. Lunch is not downtime. We're eating together and we're watching videos, we're discussing exhibits, that sort of
Uh,
thing.
yeah, that's important. Certainly, it's another way to share an experience of being with one another. But you know, fortunately, we don't live too far apart from one another. So setting up another uh, in-person meeting would be fairly easy to do, hopefully. Um,
Mhm.
so it'd be neat to see you again. But I also would like to, you know, very, very interested in the book about the teaching. So when you get closer to that, you know, being done, it would be good, maybe good to do another. Well, for both books, we could do it for both. You know, as you get nearer to the completion
Right.
of each of them, we can do another talk about them more in depth.
Yeah. Well, like I say, hopefully the artist book, Sculpture 1951, will be done by February,
Hmm.
and then a year later for the adjunct teaching.
Great.
And like I say, I'm working on multiple platforms. Maybe some other show will come up or something like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I wanted to tell you that I did have an experience teaching for Hunter College undergrads. It
Uh,
was a drawing workshop a few years ago that the Robert Reed Foundation contacted me because Robert Reed was a professor at Yale when I was there. In fact, I was his TA for a year in a drawing class for undergraduate students.
uh,
So the Robert Reed Foundation, I mean, established after he passed away several years ago,
uh,
sadly, was established to sort of keep his teaching methodology alive. You know, because he was well known as being like a, you know, really amazing teacher, and he was a really amazing teacher. I mean, I didn't realize it at the time when I was his TA how amazing he was, but he was really amazing. And so the Robert Reed Foundation partnered with Hunter College. I think it was in I want to say it was in 2018, I think. And they partnered with Hunter College and Robert Reed, Foundation kind of knew they had sort of a record of who Robert's TAs were over the years. So they contacted several of us and asked that we write a proposal for a drawing workshop that we would teach on a weekend at Hunter College. So I was I was asked to write a proposal and I did, and it was accepted. So I did teach that drawing workshop that I came up with for the undergraduates. It was a very interesting experience because, as you said, with Hunter being a more, liberal arts setting, the students in that workshop were from all different persuasions of
Right.
who was more involved in their art education, who was maybe just taking drawing as a prerequisite for something else or an elective, or so it was a very interesting experience. It was a lot of fun. It was very dynamic. Um, that was my experience with Hunter with Hunter College, limited experience. But it was great though. It was really great. So listen, so I think we've covered a lot. We can wrap it up if you'd like, and I'll get you the recording, when I've got it ready to go. I can send it to you if you want to use it for any reason. I'll
Okay.
try to edit out the center part when I switched over and made you host.
Right.
I'll try to cut that part out as best I can.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, well, Peter, thank you for talking with me. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot about your work that I did not know, and it was really nice to hear it from you. And as one teacher to another, I have a great deal of um, empathy for you. I'm not an adjunct situation, but I'm not. But I am not a sort of in the academia sense of like full time. I used to be, but not for a long time. I haven't been. So so we're kind of like, on the outskirts in a way, and without all the the benefits and so forth that full time professors get. But that's okay. It's all about teaching and how one enjoys it and makes it an important part of their lives.
Right.
That's my feeling about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And hopefully, where is it? I have Hunter, you actually given contracts. Well, you're given contracts at both schools I teach at. And maybe I'll finish, hopefully, the book before I finish the contract.
Oh yeah, good idea.
Yeah. But maybe once they read it, they won't give me another contract.
Oh God, I hope that's not the case.
Maybe that'll mean it's a good book, though. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe so, maybe so.
Okay.
But well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to bid you goodbye, and let's keep in touch, and hopefully, see each other at some point again,
Hmm.
or a little meal or something.
Very good.